Welcome to AZ TechCast, sponsored by the Arizona Technology Council, with your hosts, Steve Zylstra and Karen Nowicki. AZ TechCast is dedicated to covering innovation and technology in Arizona and beyond. Broadcasted monthly, AZ TechCast invites leading experts to have real conversations about what is happening in the tech sector across the state of Arizona. From regional news to innovative startups, companies, and emerging technologies, AZ TechCast covers the critical issues and economic trends propelling the state's growing tech ecosystem.
In a constantly changing world, businesses must stay adaptable by performing periodic strategic analysis. Through this process, company leaders can review historical data to not only inform their long-term strategy, but identify the technology solutions to stay ahead of the curve. Welcome to Phoenix Business Radio X. I'm Karen Nowicki, president and owner of Phoenix Business Radio X, and I'd like to welcome you to AZ TechCast, sponsored by the Arizona Technology Council. AZ TechCast is dedicated to covering innovation and technology in Arizona and beyond. Broadcasted monthly, AZ TechCast invites tech and business experts to have real conversation about what's happening across the state of Arizona. AZ TechCast discusses the critical issues, topics, and trends propelling the state's growing tech ecosystem. And so please join me in giving a very warm welcome to today's featured guest. We have Julie Gable, CEO and founder of BusinessWise. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
So excited. And I love the way that you spell BusinessWise. I just got a little chuckle out of that, business and then WHYS.
That's correct.
Looking forward to hearing all about your company and the work you do. And Bob Interdonato, General Manager of Lumen.
Howdy.
Hello.
Thanks
I got
for
that.
being here.
Did I do okay with the last name?
Yeah, you did a great
job. I rehearsed it about 9 times in my mind.
Just like it's spelled.
Very good. Well, that's difficult for me. And Malati Lee Parker, founder and CEO of Macroscope Studios.
Hello, thank you.
Welcome. So glad to have all three of you here. And with these accomplished experts, we also have Bianca Baliga, who is not Steve Zylstra. She's standing in for Steve today, and I'm always thrilled when she's here. Bianca is the Director of Marketing and Communications at Arizona Technology Council, and we are going to discuss how to successfully conduct strategic business analysis and prepare for an unpredictable business environment. Nobody knows what that's about these days. And we have a lot of interesting content to cover. And before we do that, let's say hello to Bianca. Welcome.
Hi there. So happy to be here with you all.
We're thrilled to have you. And we were smiling because this is the first time in the over 2 years that Arizona Technology Council and Business Radio X have collaborated on this show. And it's the first time we've had guests, 3 guests in the studio. I think last month we had 1 guest with me. Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
So thank you so much for being here. Where did you come from in the Valley? Did you have to travel far?
Yes, I did. I had to come from South Tempe.
Woo! Thank you.
You're welcome.
You did well. Bob, how about you?
Up in the Kierland area.
Not bad. Not too far.
Scottsdale.
Excellent. I was in Deer Valley this morning for a luncheon from Ahwatukee. Yes, at 7 a.m. And so, zipped back to the studio. But we are deeply appreciative of your expertise, your willingness to come and share your success story, and of course, your knowledge as we launch into today's conversation. And Bianca, next time we're going to get you here. I know you're incredibly busy, but next time we'll have you sitting here with us.
I have some serious FOMO right now, fear of missing out. So
Good. That's how we want it. Well,
very the party without me.
Right. So let's have each of you begin by just sharing a little bit about yourself, the role that you play in your organization, and then we'll get into the meat of the conversation. And the one thing we forgot to say in the green room is that we really want this to be a well-rounded conversation. Bianca and I don't want to have to be gatekeepers the whole time. We will play that role. Feel free to ask questions of each other. I know a couple of you have worked with each other in the past. But tag team off each other, let's just have it fluid. And that means there might be a little bit of an awkward pause when one of us asks a question and give you a moment to kind of formulate your thoughts. And then one of you just jump in there like we would as if we're having coffee together and no one's the gatekeeper. Is that fair enough?
Fair enough.
That's usually an off-air thing, but there we go. That's what we do before we go on air. All right. So behind the scenes. So with that, if you'd introduce yourself and tell us about the role that you play and a little bit about your organization. We've got up to an hour, so jump in.
Well, I'll go ahead and
start.
They're
looking at you.
Yeah, everyone's looking at me, so I'll jump on in. Like you said, I'm Julie Gable. I'm the founder and CEO of BusinessWise. Brief intro about me. My decades-long career in tech began back with Andersen Consulting. It's Accenture today. But back then, I was working on complex custom software implementations with Fortune 100 companies. More recently, I was the chief operating officer of a local based managed services provider, really focused in core infrastructure. And throughout my career, I have seen companies of all shapes and sizes make large investment decisions without really understanding the why behind them. And by why, I mean a clear picture of what problem it is we're trying to solve and what success looks like. And that's why I founded BusinessWise. We help companies focus on the why to drive their ROI.
Oh, so catchy.
Right.
So-
Catchy and so critical. All right, we're now staring Bob down. I
Oh,
think
no
he's
problem.
next.
So my name's Bob Interdonato. I'm the general manager for Lumen Technologies. We are the business to business arm of CenturyLink. So a lot of you might remember us as CenturyLink, but
Yes.
we rebranded the company about 2 years ago. And my responsibilities include all of our business customers from Southern Nevada throughout Arizona, New Mexico, and the slice of West Texas in and around El Paso. One of the reasons we changed the name of the company and rebranded the company back in 2020 was because we have so many different things that we do within organizations that are not network related. And by rebranding the company, we opened conversations with our customers around some of our other areas of expertise around consulting, security services, unified communications, and those types of things. And the industry in itself, the industry experts have really taken notice to some of the things that we've been doing for years and years. And it's amazing how just rebranding the company maybe opens people's eyes of what our true capabilities are.
Fascinating.
So-
We'll have you back for a branding and marketing conversation. That's neat. And how long have you been with the organization?
I've been with CenturyLink/Lumen for the last 10 years.
I think you said that. I
Yep,
apologize.
and previously I was with a competitive local exchange carrier before that,
Yeah. Okay.
and a variety of different things when I was younger.
Right. Well, many of us have, right? Lottie.
Yeah, we all have done a lot, haven't we, Bob? My name is Malati Lee Parker, and I'm the CEO and founder of Macroscope Studios. And we are invested in creating a new way of working and collaborating in this world of hybrid, remote modeling that we're kind of all just figuring out together. I think the important question that we should be asking ourselves is, when is the right time to come together in person? And how can we make those engagements as productive, as impactful, and as beautiful as possible? Beautiful offsites, beautiful outcomes.
Fantastic. Thank you all for being here. I would love to have Bianca introduce herself, of course, and tell us all about Arizona Technology Council, since some of our listeners and viewers may not know who you are.
I would love to. Thank you, Karen. I am Bianca Boliga. I am the Director of Marketing and Communications over at the Arizona Technology Council. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the council, we are the premier trade association for science and technology companies in Arizona. We have around 700 members right now that really range in size from early stage startups to larger corporations that are household names. They also span a really wide range of industries. So we've got folks in optics and photonics and aerospace and defense, a number of different industries. You name it, we've probably got a company or two at least. So we stay busy. We run about 100 plus events a year, and those can be virtually or in person. We actually have two of our largest events of the year coming up in the next couple of months. We have our Southern Arizona Tech and Business Expo, and that's in Tucson on October 19th. And then we have our Governor's Celebration of Innovation coming up on November 8th. That's at the Phoenix Convention Center. So if you want to learn more about what we do or get involved with the council, please join us at an upcoming event.
I always like to talk about the foundation as well. So SciTech Institute is the foundation for Arizona Technology Council. And when you walk down here, I don't know if Daryl pointed them out, but they're just down the hallway here in the same building. And they really support K-12 STEM education. And Bianca, watching Dr. Babendor and Kelly, just take this SciTech Institute to a whole nother level is mind-blowing. I think the last 2 years, I don't remember how many U.S. cities in addition to how many countries now, but it's not just Arizona specific. It's really impacting, having a great impact worldwide for our educators and our kids, particularly middle school. Did I do that justice? Is there anything else you'd want to add to that, Bianca?
I think you did a great job. I would just add that I was at their STEM and Innovation Summit earlier this week at the Arizona Science Center. They had over 800 people there. They had students from schools all over the state. So it was just so impressive to see their work in action. They're incredible.
Yes, doing great work. And right, that's how we land in these jobs. And maybe some of us have bounced around to different careers. We've had many people in here who, they grew up wanting to be an engineer. They're an engineer. They grew up doing one thing and they're still doing it. That hasn't been my situation. Well, let's get into the conversation around strategic analysis and really how technology can help us stay adaptable. And again, I'm just going to throw out a question and let you guys think about it and have somebody jump in and then play off of each other. How would you define strategic business analysis, and why do you think it's important for companies of all sizes, particularly in this day and age?
Well, I'll jump in there because you're speaking my love language. Strategic business analysis is really what we do at my company, and it's about that why. It's really about defining the problems that we're trying to solve and making sure that we all understand and are aligned with what success looks like. There's a great Steve Jobs quote out there. It says something like, if you define the problem correctly, you almost have the solution. And I really believe in that. And I think it's perhaps more important today that we really give that its due, because it's in today's day and age, especially within tech, it's about do more with less. It's about change or die. So everybody is really trying to move super quickly. And what we need to do is sometimes take a step back and go slowly at first so that we can move faster later on.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. But I also think in today's environment, the things have changed so much that you have to have the platform to be able to quickly, acquire data, analyze that data, and then act upon it. And if you don't have you could have the greatest business plan in the world, but if you don't have a vehicle to be able to change, like you said, adapt in a very quick manner, I think you'll fail. So, and we've seen that numerous times throughout, history. You can think of companies like Netflix and Uber and all sorts of things of that nature that totally have disrupted industries, and it's going to continue to happen.
Right. The why, though, is something that I think I've seen misinterpreted a lot in my career, and the data doesn't always tell you the why. In fact, I used to get data to tell me the why, right? So I can get the insights and figure it out. I used to be a pilot, and at the beginning of every flight, you file a flight plan, right? And you chart it. And I did it before there was a lot of fancy avionics. It was all on my knee. You didn't know where you were going or why you were taking a route, because to avert weather, or because you were uncomfortable with the terrain or something. You were about to bust into Phoenix Sky Harbor airspace, which I'd never done before, ever. If you get something wrong because you don't understand the why in this fast-paced, data-driven current environment, you have a chance to scale a mistake so fast and so expensively, you won't even know what happened. A 10-degree error when you're charting a flight plan can take you to a completely different place with enough wind speed and enough engine power. And we have that wind speed and engine power now. So unless you stop and go, where am I going? Why am I going there? And what are some of the things I need to look for so I actually get there? You're going to die.
Or be lost.
Or be lost.
I actually really love that analogy, Melati. I think that's such a good thing for businesses to keep in mind, of all sizes, honestly. But what I'd be curious to know is, when is a good time? I mean, obviously you would want to get this going before you really launch, but how do you build these times into your normal year and your normal routine to make sure it's a constant part of what you do?
I'll take it. So that's a wonderful question, Bianca. And I think the answer that I'm going to give is going to be a little bit frustrating, but it's true. You need to figure that out for yourself. And I think that if you can't answer and be honest with yourself why you're doing something, then maybe you shouldn't ask other people to do something with you. This is the work you have to do to lead, is to understand the why and figure out the right time to ask it. So it's not going to impede your velocity. It's not going to give you blinders of potential or possibility, but you are stopping every once in a while and going, does this feel right?
Yeah, I agree with that. Your analogy of a 10-degree, miscalculation might put you in Timbuktu instead of Alaska, right? I totally understand that, which is why I think, as business leaders, you constantly have to be collecting data, analyzing that data, and making sure you're going on the right course. And if you're not consistently checking that stuff, you could end up in God knows where. And like you said, spend a lot of time and energy and money and think you were doing the right thing and end up completely off course somewhere else. So I think constant evaluation and constant analysis of what you're doing and validating that the direction you're going and the why and what you're trying to accomplish, that whatever plan you put together is still leading you in that direction. I can't tell you how many times, we as an organization have thought we should go down one path, and then we've started down that path and realized, like, oh, there's a little tangent here. This is a much better route to go. Where, and like you comparing it to flying a plane, right? Storms pop up in the middle of nowhere, and all of a sudden you got to adjust and reroute and do those things. And in today's fast-paced business environment, it's no different.
Right. And it's clearly it's strategic for a reason. It's not, it's not, it is preventative. The whole idea is do this before you are spending thousands of dollars,
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of dollars to course correct. Right.
Yeah.
Don't wait for the storm.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's about being proactive, right? And I think that's where that having a really clear picture of success and success measurables defined is really important, right? Because like you said, if things get, kind of heated and confusing in the moment, right? So having those measurables that you can keep checking against, am I still on track? Am I still on track? Have I lost sight of what we're trying to accomplish? I think is super important.
Julie, those metrics that you're talking about, they come from the why in my background. right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Until I know what the why is, until I can articulate or define the problem statement, or I like to call it the North Star. Unless I know what my North Star is at all times, I don't know how well I'm doing against that. I don't know when I need to check my trajectory. I don't know how to check my airspeed. I don't know how much money I should keep pumping into this because I don't know when I'm failing or succeeding. Data helps. Data helps a lot. But unless you know what to do with that data or how you're going to evaluate it, it's just a lot of work.
Well, and in addition to the data, it's a lot about the people, right? So a lot about defining what is why or what problem we're trying to solve is going to be across disparate groups in your organization. They might have completely different perspectives on a problem that we're trying to solve and what that solution really is, and definitely what success looks like. So it's taking that data, but also reining in those different perspectives and getting alignment.
Yeah, especially, you're talking about the people equation of this whole thing. And, sometimes the best ideas come from places you would never think of, right?
Exactly.
Some of those ideas and things that are, genius to that matter, come from folks that aren't in those strategic kind of planning meetings. And you really got to empower your organization to be able to speak up. And if they see something that is not going right, to have the confidence to do that. And then you can adjust, right? And so, I run an organization across the Southwest, and I really encourage all of my people to, if they see an issue, hey, let's talk about it. Let's, bring it to my attention, and then we'll try and figure out a way to solve for that. Because the worst thing I can have is, us using a system or a tool or something else that doesn't work very well or is not producing the results that we want. But in the beginning, we thought that would be the best thing to do. And have people just quietly deal with, strife or errors or be putting out more effort than they need to be if we could make quick adjustments.
So important. Yeah. What should a company consider as they're evaluating historic data? We've touched on data just a little bit. So what should they consider? And then also in setting new priorities and goals and determining a long-term strategy. Just a mouthful there. Right?
Could you repeat the question?
It kind of depends on the data and the company and the outcomes and the mission and the value and the goals
Okay.
and the business architecture.
But one thing I would say is you have to be careful with data. Like, data is a very, very powerful tool, and I would say for a lot of companies, it's probably their most important asset next to their people. But data has its limitations. It can take you down the wrong path, the wrong flight plan pretty quickly because it can be skewed, it can be incorrect, it can be misinterpreted. So I think it's super important to understand the limitations of data when you're using it and really, really take care.
And that goes back to, I think, your quote that you shared, right? Having the right question
Yes.
so that you know what data you're looking for, what
Yeah.
information you're looking for.
Exactly.
I mean, when you're looking at statistics or data or anything else, you can, there's a human nature if you think your idea is correct to kind of skew the results and look at the results of the data that justify your position or what you've set out to do, right?
Confirmation bias.
Exactly.
Right?
Confirmation.
Yeah.
Right? You have to definitely take a step back and not be emotionally attached to what you're seeing, right? Just because you thought it was a great idea and we're going to go down this path, and then the data kind of tells me that, but it kind of doesn't tell me that. Like, don't be afraid to make a mistake, right? We've all made plenty of mistakes in business and in our careers and throughout our lives. Like, don't be afraid to admit you made a mistake and quickly adapt and change.
Big.
I've been prior to I don't know how to say this word, Julie. Starting. Now I have invented a new word called stounding. When I was in development with my current business, before I started this, I was working for a company called DaVita, which was a pretty large global company that does dialysis outpatient, and I was leading a product development team. And one of the most important things that we understood about data is that it can wear a crown or it can take you down to the pits if it's wrong. The data situation, when you're talking about healthcare or any complicated data pool, it's about where you get it, where it's sourced from, but also the transformations that happen to the data along the way, which can skew insights. I started my career as an actuarial analyst, which is basically someone who looks at numbers all day long, who looks at things called retrospective claims data. So every single time you go to the doctor's office, reams and reams of data are produced of that visit. Not only the diagnostics, the provider charts, but all the translations that happen along the way, lab values, high-tech radiology scans. All of those things kind of get coalesced and put into these big pools of data. And in healthcare, saying that we'll just, we'll see what the data says is a little bit like saying, I'm going to look into a crystal ball, because the way that data is sourced, maintained, transformed, and used along the way tends to change the data, and it changes insights, and it can lead to pretty significant disruption in strategic planning, because it's real time, but it's also lagged, if that makes sense. And when you're looking at data to give you a why, you're always going to find what you're looking for. But I think when I say the why first, and then I look for data to support that, I'm a little bit more critical of my research, of my why, of my problem statement. That's the only thing, Bob, is I feel like humans should set the stage, should kind of say the words to get the ball going. And then we should look for technology to be an enabler or a force multiplier, and looking for technology to tell us what we should be doing and why we should be doing it. And then using humans as an enabler or a force multiplier gives me a little feeling of ickiness, but I don't pretend to say that there is a complete bifurcation of data and humans. We should use them at the same time, but in the right way. And all data is, for me, is a receipt of human interactions.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying, but also to I don't think you would disagree with me that, data can also provide you insights and give you other ideas and adjust and figure out if the why that you're trying to, or what you're trying to accomplish, if you're going down the right direction.
Hard agree.
Right. So
Hard agree.
So I agree. There needs to, data for data's sake is useless information, right? I mean, what's the old saying? Junk in, junk out.
Go.
Yeah.
Garbage in.
Yeah, garbage in.
Right.
Yeah, I went with junk. Sorry.
Jai Joe.
Garbage in, garbage out. Right. So you have to. You just got to make sure that you're acquiring the right subset of information, and computers can analyze things and they can see trends and spot trends and do those things, but there's also an emotional quotient that goes to that. And how many times have you looked at a piece of information and your gut says that can't be right?
And yet everything looks like it's in alignment on paper. It should be perfect.
Right.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
you gotta trust your gut.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
On that note, Karen, do you think now's a good time to thank our first sponsor?
I do think it's a great time. Thank you. Appreciate that nice softball over my direction. So we do have two fantastic sponsors for this particular AZ TechCast. And the first one we'd like to thank is Arizona Commerce Authority. And we're going to have a moment to hear from them. We'll still be on camera, just so you know, a few things that we also failed to mention in the green room. So just smile and listen. Thanks.
Our streamlined pro-business approach helps you achieve more by putting less between you and future success. Less red tape, lower taxes, less distance separating you from the tech leaders of tomorrow. This innovative ecosystem will supply your business with tools and resources to compete in the 21st century and beyond. But your future is more than just business success. In Arizona, the lifestyle you want is at your fingertips. Explore cities known for their Southwest heritage and modern vision. Enjoy beautiful scenery and endless outdoor activities on land, water, or snow. And if you're looking for a little friendly competition, we've got plenty of teams to choose from. With constant sunshine, vibrant culture, and natural wonder, Arizona provides a style of living that's entirely unique. People from all over the world call our state home. From student leaders who fill the classrooms of our top-ranked universities, to a skilled and abundant workforce that's ready for what's next. To the neighbors, friends, and peers we interact with daily, Arizonans are united by a pioneering spirit that moves us forward. So as you look to the future, know that it's filled with the perfect balance of innovation and high-quality living that makes life better here.
I hear that spot every month, and every month I'm proud to be an Arizonan. Makes me very excited about being here and being part of the business community. Our next question, and I've been thinking about this as we're chatting because we have a unique lineup, Bianca. We've got two folks who have founded and own their own company, and then we've got Bob, of course, who represents a very large company and plays a very important role as general manager. So when we're talking about when a company wants to start to get involved in the strategic planning process, who ought they include and involve in that when they're working on a new technology project or initiative? So I'm already thinking about this as we've had the other conversations, but who might a company want to involve in their strategic planning process if they're working on a new technology project or initiative? Go.
Well, I'm going to jump in.
Go for it.
Lucky you sit next to me. It's kind of like
I
the
feel
default.
like I get to be
default seat.
first in line here. Yeah. So I think this goes back to our question about alignment. And I think it's really important with a new tech initiative to broaden it beyond just your IT group, right? Because number one, if you're doing tech for the sake of tech and you think it's not impacting the business or moving the ball forward with business, then you're just doing tech for the sake of tech, right? So it's critical to think about everybody who's going to be using that whether it's software or a tool or something that you're hoping to implement, even as just a change initiative, and really bring them on board. From my experience, I would say that most tech initiatives that fail don't fail because of the tech. They fail because we didn't get buy-in from the user group. Maybe we didn't get their requirements nailed down. Maybe we didn't communicate it and get everyone excited. Maybe we didn't train them to use it. And a lot of times it even shifts your organization. It might change people's roles. It might change the structure. It will most definitely change process. So nailing all those kind of periphery things is super important with the tech initiative. And the only way to do that is to get all the stakeholders in the room.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think the tech for a long time and IT organizations for a long time were viewed as a cost center, right? And then in March of 2020, what happened? We sent 75% of the U.S. workforce home basically overnight. And and a lot of us are still working either from home or in this hybrid environment. But the most amazing thing about that period of time in March of 2020 was, the majority of organizations relied on IT to keep the motor running and to keep everything seamless. And by and large, CIOs and IT departments moved all these people to home by and large without breaking anything. Right. It's one of the most amazing human feats that has ever happened.
You're giving me PTSD a little bit, Bob.
Yeah.
I was working at DaVita in March of
Yeah.
2020, and I had a global team, and I was reporting to the CIO. Well, not directly to him, but up through the CIO. And I worked with a lot of people who made that happen. And I remember going to the office and actually packing and mailing and shipping laptops and
Monitors.
monitors.
Yeah.
It was not just a flip the switch situation. This
No.
was hardware, infrastructure, software,
Right.
remoting, teaming.
So my point to that is when we got through that, I think the level of collaboration and the seat at the table that IT departments and CIOs had amongst the senior leadership teams completely changed
Thankfully so.
in a short period of time, right? So much so that by 2023, 60% of CIOs will be tapped to lead cross-departmental functions and
Finally.
organizations to better innovate and drive revenue or drive out cost within individual businesses. So
And
it's
someone
about
like you,
time.
I was just going to say, it's literally what I was going to ask you. Are you saying to yourself, it's about time?
Yes.
All of us that are in tech have been here,
Right.
we've been, kind of calmly watching, through the window or on the other side and seeing all the things that are going on and things like shadow IT and marketing departments going out and doing things, HR buying software and without really seeing if we have the infrastructure to run all this stuff and all that stuff. Now, I think we're at the point in time because, we've, in IT, we've elevated our status within organizations that, there's going to be a lot more collaboration. And like I said, a statistic out there is 60% of CIOs will by next year will be tasked to lead cross-departmental functions.
That's the first time I've heard that, and it makes complete sense.
It makes perfect sense. And I would just add on to that. I think us going remote drove part of that, but also just the nature of disruption in the industry is a lot of it is driven by tech.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about strategic advantages and what has really disrupted, a lot of times it's them figuring out a better way to deliver business, and it's enabled through technology.
Well, now nothing is delivered without technology touching it. And business processes and technical capabilities are no longer divorceable. You have to keep looking at both, which is the strategic business analysis. We've been knocking on the doors of business. Julie and I have been kind of traversing this weird veil of we'll hang out in business for a while, understand kind of the business machine, really the fundamentals of the business, what you deliver, how you make money, what you deliver, how you make money. And we have been enabling those business functions. The why was coming from the business, and IT was just meant to deliver. And over the last 10 years, there is no more business tells IT what to do. That's a great way to make money. That's a great way to waste money.
Mm-hmm.
There is something that's more important, and that is that cross-functional collaboration and alignment and figuring out who needs to set strategy, but not just for the company. You need a digital strategy just as much as you need a human strategy.
So maybe tech is the how in the context of this conversation, right? We talk a lot about the why, but how for technology. I'm curious though, what advice would you give to company leaders that are debating between building custom solutions internally from a tech perspective or buying something off the shelf?
So I deal with businesses of
Go
all
ahead.
sizes, right? So from Fortune 100 companies down to, small pizza shops and barber shops and those types of things, right? So, I think one thing is you have to understand the why and what you're trying to get, where you're trying to go, and figure out whether you have the resources. And I would certainly talk to outside firms like you guys to help figure that stuff out. But see if there's, is it going to be better for you to do this internally? Do you have the time, the money, and the resources to do that? And is there a marketplace for you to monetize what you're doing after that? So there's many businesses that I deal with that have developed their own software, for example, to perform certain functions. And then as they realized there was nothing out on the marketplace, they went and built something that was better than anything else that was out in the
WebPT
marketplace.
comes to mind for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then now they're going out and they're monetizing what they did. So that's something that you really have to think about. I mean, if you're a small or a mid-market organization, you don't have the time or the money or the resources. You're probably better off investing in or finding partners that can help you accelerate and get to your goals. If you're a large Fortune 500 company and you've got a lot of those costs already in the business, and find different areas you can cut costs to take those resources and then go develop something, and then who knows where it's going to go, right? WebPT is a great example of that.
Well, and I think you called out a really important point, though. It's about your core competencies, right?
Yep.
And so if you are looking at developing custom software, is that your business? Is what I would ask, right? Because that's what kind of an investment it takes, is to build out custom software. So quite honestly, if that is not your business, if you're not a software player and you're going to monetize it, like Bob said, then most likely you're better off. You're not going to go out and build a better CRM than Salesforce, who's been doing it for a long time, right? So we got to be honest with yourself, but really think about where your core capabilities lie and really focus on those.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Digital tools are quickly becoming an asset class, right? I've been working in IT as a cost center in large corporations for a while and developing internal tools. So these are tools for employees to do their jobs better. And there was never a question of should we sell this, because we weren't a custom development shop. We were a service organization. And I think right now there is a stronger perspective when evaluating innovation initiatives. Is this a potential capitalizable vehicle? Can we actually develop something that we can introduce on the street? And that's becoming more and more as innovation centers are being stood up, as kind of marketing and product development and operations blend together to figure out the next digital solution. Those are all the product market fit conversations that need to happen after you figured out the problem that you're solving. And if you can solve it for yourself, and that's what you're really solving it for, and that's why you're building custom solution, you don't care what's happening outside. You have a problem. You have a delivery problem and you want to fix it. Build it yourself, possibly, is true. If there's a lot of IP, intellectual property, or if there's a lot of sensitivity or regulatory control, sometimes it makes sense to build it in-house. And there's lots of ways you can build it in-house without, building a whole custom development shop or building one from the ground up. But the part where I always talk to my clients, internal and external clients, is if you don't know what you're doing and how you're doing it, and you don't know your own why, you're gonna buy a solution off the shelf that's not going to meet your needs. And what you're going to do is you're going to edit your processes, your manual processes. You're not going to reconfigure your platform. The people who are doing the work for you are going to develop shortcuts. All this tribal knowledge is going to start to get abstracted. We're all working remote. We can't pop into somebody's office and go, hey, if you double click in that place in the workflow, does that automatically save the record, or do I have to press submit? Can't do that because you forgot why you were building the technical solution along the way. Eventually it became an implementation of an outside CRM, right? You know what I'm saying, Julie?
I agree to a certain extent, although I would say, and I think it's important at a strategic level in a company to to understand there's opportunity costs to the decisions you make.
That's right.
Right. So when you invest resources to making maybe the perfect platform, as opposed to the one that's pretty darn close, you're making a decision about how to allocate your resources, and you've got to understand that if that is not your core capability as your business, you're taking focus away from what is your core capability. So
I agree with you. And my point was, unless you see a way to monetize that in the end, you're probably better off involving partners and getting advice and, buying something. I mean, Salesforce doesn't sell, there's some stuff off the shelf, but obviously it's way customizable. We use it to run our business today. But so it's just a matter of figuring out who you are, who you want to be, right? And does it make sense for me to go down this road and develop it? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? And do I have the money and the opportunity cost, like you said, to put, a group of people off to the side to dedicate their time and energy to do this? And will it pay off in the end?
Yeah. And if it's monetized, then you could probably argue that it's one of your core capabilities.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So that's what it really comes down to.
So you've already started answering this question a little bit, but I'm curious about some of the pitfalls that you see. So what are some of the common issues or missteps that you see companies make when they're performing a strategic analysis that does not let them be successful?
I'm going to take it.
Go for it.
I love getting permission. The thing that I see all the time, it sounds so silly, but it's really hard to do, is articulate what the problem is. It's hard to put it into words. You can say it, we can talk about it, we'll fill each other's sentences. But when it comes to writing it down, everyone kind of gets nervous, and it's harder. And so one of the pitfalls that I see, and one of the things that I love to do and made a business about it, is helping people envision that. A bunch of distributed voices. So you make the problem statement as robust as possible, and you write it down, and you use that as your next vehicle to get you to your milestone of how are you going to chunk out the work, or what's the most important thing to us right now, or what's a why underneath the why, right? The old Ishikawa 5 whys thing is you want to ask why, not just one time at the beginning of an initiative, but you want to ask why as many times throughout the process without being annoying, because the why will change, right? And it's important to talk about it and react to it. Otherwise, you just kind of build resentment. So I think for us, when we talk about the most important thing you can do is write the why down.
It's so scary though, right? Because once you write it down, it's real, right? And then you're committed. Hey, we actually put this on the board. Like don't forget we have erasers, right?
That's true. The other thing that's really important about that you started to highlight there, Melati, is it's a prioritization.
Yep.
Right? I haven't met anyone yet who has unlimited resources. We all have unlimited wants, right? So part of that is really understanding not just what problem are we solving, but what are the most important parts of that we need to solve. I think a lot of times people struggle because they try to boil the ocean, right? We're going to buy this tool, we're going to have it up and running, and it's going to be rolled out to the entire organization within 3 months.
I was just going to say 3 months. It's always 3
always
months.
3 months. And it's never 3 months, right?
Or like 30 months.
So it's about, using those best practices around piloting, about making sure we take the time to really understand who's going to be impacted.
You reminded something. We use the same methodology. So we do, obviously, we own and operate one of the largest IP backbones in across the globe, right? So you could argue we're number 2 or number 3, but we're one of the big boys, right? So we own and operate that backbone, and we see on any given day we see anywhere between 65 and 80% of the world's IP traffic. Okay, so I mean, our acquisition or merger with Level 3 and Level 3 owned Global Crossing that had this big fiber footprint across the globe, and all the other companies that we've kind of merged with along the way. So we actually took that network and turned it into a threat sensor. So we were talking about business intelligence and AI and those types of things, right? So we understand where all the threats are coming from. we're kind of like the US Post Office in a way, where we don't know what's in your package. We don't know what you're sending your mom for Christmas, and we don't know what you're sending your kids to college. But we do know that you don't normally send more than one package every 3 months. When all of a sudden you start sending a bunch of packages in one single day, it's cause for investigation.
It's like my bank alerts.
You might be a bad actor, right? So we investigate that. With all the AI we put in there, we manage that entire global footprint with 9 people.
What?
Okay. So we see over 1 billion DNS queries every day. So going back to what you were saying in the methodology of where do I put my money, one of the things we provide for our clients is what we call penetration testing or security pen testing. So what we'll do is we'll go and we'll look at where all the information is coming into their network, where that information is coming from. We'll look at the vulnerabilities we have, and then just like you said, we map it out for them. So we say, hey, these are the top 5 most critical things that you need to do. You've got 30 problems here, but these ones down at the bottom are very minute, or there's not a lot of people or bad actors out there that are going to exploit these. So you need to take care of these top 5 things today. And then when you get there, let's see where we're at. And then we can kind of move on and down the stack till we solve all your problems. But you're exactly right. Not I have unlimited wants. I know my kids have unlimited wants, right?
That's for sure.
Especially, think about when we looked at the Sears catalog. I'm dating myself when I was growing up, right? We used to check all the stuff off on there. But so we have limited resources. So being able to deploy your resources in the right spot and in the right place is really, really really important as an organization. You can't do everything, and you have to know that, right? So, it's, and today, I mean, whether you could argue whether we're in a recession or not in a recession, and a lot of our larger customers have kind of put hold on some bigger projects because they're trying to figure out, hey, what's going to happen and what's going to do this. So, as an IT organization or as an IT provider to those organizations, they still want to innovate, right? And they're still trying to innovate. You can't just stop innovating, otherwise, you're going to lose market share. And so what we really focus on with our clients is taking ideas to them around how to utilize their current spend and their current cost containment and rearrange that to be able to use those monies into spots where they can become more innovative, right?
Biggest bang for the buck.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? What's moving the needle?
What's going to move the needle? What's going to move the needle the quickest? And, so it's just, it's the environment we're in today. But I agree with you 100%. You need to prioritize what you're doing, what's most important to you, and where, do I really want, a new car, or do I want to, remodel my front yard? And,
can't do both right now.
Can't do both right now.
Well,
right?
it would be lovely to do both. But the reality is something's got to go first and see where it lands. Well, we have a handful of other questions we want to make sure that you each have a chance to address in the next 15 minutes of our conversation. But before we do that, we'd like to thank our other sponsor. It is our 2022 Tech Advocate sponsor, JDH Insights. Let's hear from JDH Insights.
Thank you, JDH Insights, for being our 2022 Tech Advocate sponsor. A leader in coaching and executive development, JDH Insights is committed to helping organizations cultivate and leverage their most important and complex asset, their humans. Visit jdhinsights.com to enhance leadership and improve team dynamics to take your business to the next level.
Awesome. So we've started to talk a little bit about this already. Lots of great points being made. I'm curious, though, how would you classify sort of your unique takes on helping companies overcome some of these barriers in the strategic business analysis process? So how do you help them stay adaptable through your businesses?
I love that Bob just kind of led with that a few moments ago. So is there anything else you want to add in addition to that?
I think one of the things that we try and do as an organization is to help define the business problem, right? What is the business problem? And then, use technology to help solve those issues.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing too, that's out there, without the kind of underlying right platform in place, you can't do a lot of these things. Like you may have some grandiose expectations of putting in some new process, but without the tools and the underlying technology in there, you can't do that. So you may have to redefine what your why is or what you're trying to accomplish based upon your resources and what you have, or figure out a way to, rob Peter to pay Paul, or be more innovative over here in order to control costs over here, and those types of things. So I would leave it at that.
What was the question?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
How do each of you help companies overcome the barriers and remain adaptable in changing business
I got
environments?
lost in Bob's reply.
I know.
I forgot
So
what
good.
the question was. Not that it was. Got lost in it. I was paying attention.
You're mesmerized. I know.
I was. Hypnotized me. So strategic business analysis is something that I think a lot of people feel like they've got it handled in their organization. Like if you have an executive suite, if you have a CEO, COO, CPO, CMO, CR, whatever C's, typically that's the collection of people that you look to help define strategy. And so there's this underlying assumption that it's happening regularly, and that it's happening with efficiency, and that it's happening in a kind way. And when I say kind, I mean it takes into account the constraints that your business is under, your employees are under, but also kind of overall what we've been through in the last few years, just taking a step back and realize there's some things out of our control, and taking the time to write those things down and call them assumptions, and writing a strategic plan down and working through those types of discussions. It's hard to have. Everyone kind of wants to do their own thing. When you're dealing with leaders, they have their own kind of best practices. They have their own motions, and kind of getting them all in concert is the goal of strategic planning, and defining the why, a collective why together. And my company helps do that through strategic offsites or board retreats or leadership retreats, helping facilitate those conversations, helping write things down for them, and then giving them a little light coaching on how to have kind conversations when you're trying to convey a constraint. Because that's when strategy gets hard, is when they're counterintuitive. There are counterintuitive places in strategy, right? We call it orthogonally thinking. So you have two.
What kind of thinking?
Orthogonally. Thinking orthogonally.
New word for the day?
Yeah, new to me as well.
Did you make that one up? I made up one earlier.
Yeah.
I wish I made that.
Boundary? What was it?
Astounding?
I didn't
Astounding
write
a
it.
company?
Astounding a company. That's it. Starting
Or say that
Circle.
orthogonally.
orthogonally.
So
Holy cow.
thinking of something a right angle
Mhm.
has one point in the middle, and it has two directions of thrust, essentially. And when you're thinking orthogonally, you're looking at it from one place, but you're looking at it in two very different directions of thrust. And I think when you're planning strategy for a lot of businesses, you're looking at one way of thrusting. And sometimes looking at the opposite or orthogonal helps you understand some of the constraints that you might be under. And we help with asking those types of questions.
Mhm.
It's actually a probably more confusing way of saying.
No, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So-
I went to my son's geometry class. I mean, as in, he's doing homework at home and he keeps wanting to show me these angles and explain everything. He's like, or you could just say it's a right angle. But now I can come back and go, but have you thought about it from this perspective?
So you have something to add?
Oh yeah, I was
Awesome.
just going to say, what my company does is we play in the space between business and tech, right? So the strategic business analysts that work at my company, we all have deep technical, but also deep business backgrounds and experience, which allows us to be translators. Also change managers, helping with all those soft areas around communication and training that are often forgotten.
So I talk to a lot of CIOs on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis, and I agree with you. Like, the senior leadership team in most organizations, whether it's business owners like yourself or in senior leadership positions in larger organizations, a lot of times people assume that they're setting the right strategy and doing the right things, right? And what I hear from a lot of CIOs especially is that their team doesn't challenge them enough, and their partners don't challenge them enough. And so just because XYZ company has always done business this way, or they've always designed their infrastructure this way, they're not being challenged enough by their partners or individuals within their organization. And there tends to be a little bit of frustration or wish from individuals in those roles that their employees would speak up more and challenge the status quo, because just like you're all four of us, we're all individuals. We have one train of thought. We're open to other opinions. We're trying to make the best decision for the organization possibly. And the more ideas that we can get, the better off we're going to be. And all of us realize that. What I think is far too unspoken is if you're in a role that is not in one of the, setting the strategy or setting the vision, don't think your opinion isn't meaningful and speak up. It'll be amazing what it'll do for your career. I pointed out things in, within organizations that I've been in to make us better. And that's some of the ways that, I've moved ahead in my career. Right. So if you're in that position and you see things that are out there, don't assume that the senior leadership team knows everything and they're setting the right vision all the time. Now, they may know some things that you don't know, and they may be making decisions of things they can't share with you at that point in time, but your input is always going to be valued. Always going to be valued.
And along those lines, I think this might sound a bit self-serving, but I think there's a lot of value in bringing outside perspectives into your organization. It's very easy to get into we've always done it this way. We've already made that decision. We've always done it. So bringing in an outside perspective, whether it's a partner, vendor, consultant, I think can add a lot of value in giving you new perspectives, maybe, or what is it? Or what? Orthogonal perspective.
Before you leave, you'll need to write that down for us on the whiteboard.
I'm going with right angle.
Right. Yes.
Not that smart.
There you go.
Well, we've got about 5 minutes left, so I want to make sure we have an opportunity to take a little stab at both these last two questions. The first one being, what are some of the cutting-edge technology advancements that are moving the needle on how long-term business strategies are formulated?
I'm going to dive right in there and say I think the future's around data. Taking big data and turning it into meaningful information that people can act on and make decisions about is, I think it's where we're headed. And I think most organizations out there are pretty low on that maturity curve. So
I would argue data is the new currency. I think it's more valuable than being able to monetize that. And then the quicker you can acquire that information, analyze it, and then make decisions around it, the better off you're going to be. I think the future of, one of the things that I don't think people realize is out there is this whole concept of edge computing. We've built out a huge edge compute environment in all the old neighborhoods and central offices where, some of you might still have home phone lines. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. But, most of you have disconnected that. So that left us with a bunch of space and power. And so we've built a compute and storage shack in almost every neighborhood throughout the U.S. That can reach, 98% of the U.S. population in under 5 milliseconds. And I don't think people realize that that's out there, but that's going to help us acquire data quicker, be able to analyze it quicker, and then act upon it. And I think you're absolutely right. I would argue that it's not coming. I would argue it's here today.
And is it just for enterprise and large businesses? Or are we talking small micro businesses like me? I mean, data, it's critical no matter what. We need to know what we're looking at and have the sources, the resources to give us the truth about what's happening.
Absolutely.
I say this to my team all the time. So there's an art and science to business, right? The art is your emotional quotient and what you see and what you're doing. If you're a sole proprietor and you're out there and you're gaining, because you pretty much know what you're going to do and you can see kind of the future. You see the changes you want to be able to make. But as you grow as an organization, you start to have to rely, especially as you get into higher leadership positions, you have to start to rely more on science than you do on art. Now, I have a bunch of individual contributors in my organization, and they still rely heavily on art every single day. But I need them to put that information into tools and systems. So when I'm looking at something from a macroeconomic point of view, I can use the science along with art. So in a small business, I think it's probably 80% art, 20% science. But as you go up the stack, that'll flip.
Yeah.
Well, and even a small business has to worry about the security of their data.
Yes.
Sure. Absolutely.
We all have to worry about that.
Absolutely.
Especially when you rely on.
I'll throw this out. This is kind of a cool factoid, right? Since the pandemic, ransomware attacks are up 500%.
Yes.
The average payout for an organization on a ransomware attack is up 78% to almost $500,000.
Yep.
Okay.
Wow.
And the prosecution rate, all the work we do at the FBI, all of us security, the prosecution rate is less than 0.5%. So
That's right.
it is a very lucrative business, very low barrier to entry. And if you don't think, and you have to start thinking differently. Before, we build a house around a wall around our house, and we put a screen door with a lock on it. And then we put a front door with a deadbolt on it and prevent people from coming in. Today, you have to realize people are already in your house. You've got to figure out a way to have them not take stuff out of your house. And there's this concept of zero trust out there in the security space. And if you haven't investigated that, you should be doing that like when this is done.
Right. Wow. What's fascinating about today's conversation with you, you all have, certainly you've been fantastic. And the amount of little vignettes or stories and metaphors that you've shared made it, someone like me who's not tech savvy at all, very understandable. I really appreciate that. All these examples have been phenomenal. Bianca, what do you think?
I totally agree. I think you all took something very abstract and made it tangible. And I always get so upset when we start to get into really great parts of the conversation towards the end of our hour. But I'm just so grateful for all of you taking the time to be here today and for contributing your expertise to the conversation.
And with that,
Well, thank you.
we're done.
Thank you for having me.
So
Great-
good.
Great meeting you, lovely ladies.
So
I
good.
appreciate that. I appreciate the time here today.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You guys have been brilliant. The show notes will have our speakers' information, and we'll have that turned around as a podcast after this live broadcast within just a couple of days, early next week. I want to thank you again for being our speakers for this area of expertise and for your time today. You've been listening to AZ TechCast, brought to you by Phoenix Business Radio with Business Radio X. Today's AZ TechCast was brought to you by Arizona Commerce Authority, the state's leading economic development organization with a streamlined mission to grow and strengthen Arizona's economy. So thank you again for Arizona Commerce Authority. We couldn't do it without you. And as well, we want to thank JDH Insights, the 2022 Tech Advocate sponsor. Visit jdhinsights.com to enhance leadership and improve team dynamics to take your business to the next level. If you are interested in being a podcast participant or sponsor for the Council's AZ TechCast, contact Bianca at marketing@aztechcouncil.org to learn more about opportunities to further position you as a tech expert, influencer, and innovator. Until next time, again, I'm Karen Nowicki. We want to thank you for joining AZ TechCast.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of AZ TechCast with Arizona Technology Council, featuring leading tech and business experts that help influence and shape our great state and the industries they serve.